Coming up on Chopper's political podcast. But I've had death threats. I've had paper death threats with, we know where you live sort of thing. I've had people spitting at me outside Parliament. It's pretty revolting.
Welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast, recorded at my favourite pub a stone's throw from the gates of the Houses of Parliament. Weekly I bring you guests, gossip and stories from my favourite pub table here in Westminster. We have a packed podcast for you today with chats with Dame Andrea Leadsom, a former Cabinet Minister and now a Health Minister, and Jenny Chapman, Baroness Chapman of Darlington, Shadow Minister for the Cabinet Office. But first to Dame Andrea Leadsom. Most former Cabinet Ministers slope off to make money privately and spend time maybe with their families or possibly their constituents, but not Dame Andrea Leadsom. She's devoted her latter political career to improving the life chances of toddlers. Dame Andrea, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast. I mean, that is right, isn't it? You were a three-time Cabinet Minister. I'll just run through it quickly. Environment, Business, Leader of the House of Commons, battling with John Bercow. You ran for leader twice in 2016, 2019. And now you've got the most junior rung as a Parliamentary Under Secretary of State in the Department of Health and Social Care. Why?
Well, I have had a passion for giving every baby the best start for life for about 27 years, so long before I went into politics. And it all came about really because when I had my first child, he's now 28 and 6'2", and I suffered from postnatal depression. And soon afterwards, my mum, herself a trained therapist and midwife, said, let's get involved with this charity that is helping families who are struggling to form that secure bond with their babies. And I did, and became chair of the charity, set up other charities in that same space. And when I came into politics, basically really wanted to work on supporting families in that period from conception to the age of 2, which is when the building blocks for lifelong emotional and physical health are laid down. And the fact is, every parent, when you find you're expecting a baby, you're like, oh, what now? Yeah. And that is the feedback we get from everyone. It was like, I just didn't know what I would need or where I could get it. So actually, this is all about providing wraparound support in family hubs for people who are expecting a baby to help them with mental health, with breastfeeding, with education, and all of the midwifery and health visiting that they might need in one place. So for me, when I was on the backbenches and being offered a role back in government, I sort of thought, well, there's two jobs I would take. One would be Chancellor and the other would be Minister for Babies. So I wasn't offered Chancellor, which is to my great disappointment.
Well, let's come on to your future politics.
Okay, let's do that,
But so some of that care is piecemeal, isn't it? You have visits of my midwives post the baby being born, help with latching on if you're breastfeeding and rest, but you're trying to bring it all to one place.
Yeah. So obviously home visits are essential, a really important part of care in that perinatal period. But actually, for most parents and carers, whether they're adoptive or grandparents, etc., or birth parents, what they want is a place they can go to get trusted advice, but also just to go, if you've had a bad night, you just want somewhere to go and have a cup of tea and let someone else hold the baby for you and actually be in a warm and welcoming environment.
See an adult maybe, if you're on your own.
Absolutely, yes, see an adult and maybe get some help with, whilst you're there, perhaps with housing advice or perhaps smoking cessation, but also very definitely some advice on why won't my baby stop crying? Or I feel a bit down, can I talk to someone about how I'm feeling? Or, my partner is really struggling becoming a dad for the first time. So there's all kinds of things that try to engage with mums and dads and other partners so that everybody can feel, there is support there when you become a parent.
And that can feed through into the child, can it, and stress out the baby?
Exactly. That is the whole point of it. That the whole point of it is that in the first year of life, a baby's brain is making about 1 million neural connections a minute. And what that means is that all of the earliest experiences of the baby are really having a fundamental impact on that baby's capacity for life. So a baby that is loved and well attended and whose needs are met will literally grow up with a brain that is moulded in such a way as to think that the world's a good place. And that baby will go on to be a child that can cope with life's ups and downs, that can learn later in life, can hold down a relationship themselves, they'll also have better physical health outcomes. So actually that early period, which I'm afraid in public policy has been ignored for far too long.
Yes.
And I'm so pleased that this government has really started to embrace it, to really focus on outcomes. I mean, Sure Starts were a great thing, not to take away from that at all, but Sure Starts did not focus on outcomes for babies. And what this government has done, which I'm so proud of, is to really make sure that every baby is getting that level of support that can help them to go on to be school ready and a fully capable adult.
Sure Start was axed by the Tory government, wasn't it, in the 2010s?
No, it wasn't axed. What happened was that the budget for it was unring-fenced, but there was very clear evidence that, number one, Sure Starts were about buildings. They were also about under-5s. And also, they didn't bring all the services under one roof in a universal way. So they became quite stigmatising, and a lot of families found that I didn't want to go there because I worried that they might take my children away from me. And others they became a place where you went if you were a middle-class parent. They weren't universal. So the Family Hubs and Start for Life programme is all about everybody being in the same place and finding out about themselves, their relationships, their babies, education on how to wean, to feed your baby, etc., all under one roof.
Because all that stopped, when I remember with my three, all that stopped as soon as the baby was born. All the support you had from the antenatal group you'd formed, you had to carry on with a WhatsApp group, or was not really
wasn't
sure
even
WhatsApp
then.
was.
No, exactly.
It was a phone call, wasn't it? But you somehow made it work with other dads as a dad. But
yes.
I mean,
so some
informal.
do, but an awful lot of people become very isolated. And of course, in COVID lockdown, a huge number of babies really just had no socialisation at all. Yeah. And parents are very worried about developmental delay and why isn't my baby talking? Well, that's because they never heard people talking. You know, it is as straightforward as that. If you talk to your baby, smile at your baby, hug them, skin-to-skin contact, all of these things are absolutely critical.
And are you happier doing this one bespoke part of public policy than running business department or running the environment department? Do you know what I mean? I was struck by how Theresa May said she was Home Secretary for the longest period, I think, of the last century, or record time, I think, 6 years. But the thing she was relied on was her modern slavery agenda, despite keeping the country safe, dealing with terror threats that we don't even know about probably because they kept secret. But the one thing she was able to talk about was quite a narrow part of policy making.
Yeah, so I think if you are to be a successful MP, you have to have your own missions. You have to know what you're there for. But of course, as the Minister for Start for Life, Primary Care and Public Health, I actually have responsibility for GPs, dentists, opticians,
it's not just, it's other things
pharmacists,
too.
Obesity,
all right, fair enough.
HIV,
But you know
smoking,
what I mean, though? You're not doing the over. They're doing it at your junior level now, rather having a big job, which is
so it's very different. I think when I was Secretary of State for Business, for example, you have an overview and you're pulling the levers. You're worrying about budgets, you're worrying about headcount and direction of travel and setting the strategy for the department. Now I'm a junior minister again. I actually have very hands-on responsibility. So I've just launched a dental recovery plan. Later today, I've got a meeting with a group of GPs on the future for GP practice and another one on the future for the dental contract. I'm planning later today also for what are we going to do about childhood obesity. So there's all kinds of things where you really do roll your sleeves up and get stuck in a way that as the Secretary of State, you have more of an overview, but you can't sort of dig as deeply. But again, I would say that's why as an MP or as a minister, you have to have your passions and you have to get stuck into those.
Yeah, and dentistry is a huge issue for GB News viewers and listeners. I mean, they really are concerned about that. And you're doing more to try and get more people access to NHS dental care. Exactly.
I mean, that was my real burning platform, if you like. When I came into this job, I was determined to get that dental recovery plan out there. So we've now launched a plan which will give 2.5 million more dental appointments, which is great news. But we're also launching Golden Hellos to get dentists into places that are underserved. And we're going to have mobile dental vans. And we're also looking at the sort of supply side. We're improving the capacity of dental therapists to be able to do more to support. We're looking at new dental training facilities. And we're also consulting on getting graduate dentists, which I'm sure your listeners will be interested in, to commit to spending some of their time once they've trained in the NHS. Because at the moment, unbelievably, as far as I'm concerned, you get this very expensive training as a dentist and then you can just go and practice privately, having been trained at the expense of the taxpayer. So in my view, that does not sound right.
So how long will it be locked into the NHS for?
Well, that's the consultation that's underway right now. But as far as I'm concerned, I would like to get that done
5 years
and then move on. Well, I mean, probably not 5 years, but it certainly needs to be, and probably a bit of carrot and stick. It seems to me perfectly reasonable. You get your training and you do private practice if you then pay for your training. But if you're getting this completely, and I understand it's more expensive than training a GP to train a dentist. And so the idea that you then go off and just do, veneers and tooth whitening and straightening and so on privately does not seem right to me when the taxpayer has paid the bill for all of your training.
Yeah, so you're not going to say how long you'll be forced
to
be.
Not at this stage, just because it's a consultation, yeah.
I remember vividly getting back from around here on Brexit morning, getting home, and then David Dimbleby announced the result of the Brexit referendum, and you were in the studio with him.
Yes, exactly.
And your reaction was visceral. You went, you do it now, go on. You went, yes.
And he sort of went, he sort of held his lip at me. But yeah,
back then
he insists he didn't, of course.
Yes,
but,
of course.
Unbiased,
unbiased. But it was impartial. But it was a welcome morning for Brexiteers.
Oh, it was amazing, wasn't it?
And it's been a bit of a wobble since then, hasn't it? Now, what's your view on Brexit?
So I still hold it was the best thing we ever did. And I know a lot of people sort of, want to sort of rewrite history. And of course, the reality is there is no counterfactual. So you don't have the ability to see the United Kingdom in the EU today versus the United Kingdom out of the EU today. So you can't sort of compare and contrast. But the things I would point to is, our ranking in world soft power has gone up. Our ranking at the World Trade Organization has gone up. We have the freedom to sign up to
We have a place there now, don't we, of course, at the WTO. We have a place at WTO.
Exactly. We have our own place at the WTO, yes. Whereas when we were a part of the EU's rankings in terms of ease to do trade with was lower than the UK's is on a standalone basis. We have the world's preeminent financial services sector. We've signed up to the CPTPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Deal. We're the first European country to do so. Massive potential for trade and growth in the areas we're good at, things like mortgages, insurance, financial services, all of the services sector, education, with Asia that has the sorts of things, cheaper manufacturing, etc., that we don't have. So there's huge opportunities for the UK going forward. And we've lost nothing. We're still part of Five Eyes intelligence. We're part of the UN Security Council. We speak the world's international business language. We have the world's best capital city on earth, not according to me, but according to the world. London is a superb capital city.
Despite all
they
that,
are.
Because that we're British, or because we're not seeing the benefit, or
I'm cup half full, and I'm the sunlit uplands girl. So as far as I'm concerned, we've seen the Edinburgh reforms in my specialist subject of finance. The Edinburgh reforms will make the city more competitive. We need to get the London Stock Exchange to be more globally competitive.
Yes.
We've freed up by being able to get away from Solvency II. We've freed up institutional money to invest in the UK economy and long-term infrastructure.
So there's a story there to be told about Brexit being a positive thing.
Absolutely. And there's a huge story to be told.
Yeah.
Let's tell it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's Good Friday. We are still a Christian country. What do you think about Cadbury's offering gesture eggs, not Easter eggs?
Easter eggs are not a Christian symbol. I mean, I am a committed Christian myself. And so, Good Friday is a day of great sadness, actually, for Christians. It's the day where Jesus was crucified. And then, Easter Sunday is the amazing day in which he rose from the dead and demonstrated to all of us that turning to Christ means that you are forgiven your sins on this earth. And let's be frank about it, none of us are free from sin. Literally none of us, apart from Jesus. So I don't particularly have a view on, what did you call them?
Gesture eggs is the new
gesture
thing.
Eggs. Yeah, no, I think that's ridiculous. We are a Christian country. I hold those traditions as well as my faith very dear.
Yes.
And I think it's a great shame when people fiddle with things like Easter eggs or indeed the England shirt, that's another
so you're
disaster.
Against,
oh, yes.
Yeah, it's a playful interpretation of the St. George's Cross.
Is it? Okay. I don't think that works.
Did you find it playful?
No, I don't think St. George would have appreciated that.
No, indeed. He's Turkish, of course, St. George, but we'll have to move on.
Which is fine, and we don't mind sharing him with Greece and everyone else, but, the England shirt is the England shirt, in my view.
Just while touching on your faith there, there's a big vote coming up on abortion. I think you're pro-choice, aren't you?
I certainly am pro-choice, but to the point where once you have a viable fetus, then you do not have the right to decide to terminate. And what I don't
24 weeks is your...
24 weeks, maybe even 22. I'm still considering that because the actual the truth of the matter is that with amazing advances in medicine, 22-year-old fetuses can be now significantly more viable than they could be previously.
Yes.
And if you're born at 24 weeks, then your chances of surviving are very good. The thing that gives me real cause for concern is the proposal on an amendment to decriminalise abortion to full term, because at the end of the day, a baby that is, 6 months old, 8 months old, if it is aborted, that will be a baby that is dying. And I find that extraordinary. I find it extraordinary that it would be to decriminalise it for the mother who took the decision to terminate, but not for the clinician who actually then performed the termination. Really. Nor can I. It's completely incoherent.
It seems to give the wrong message, maybe.
Yeah.
And just briefly about your party, 63 Tory MPs have resigned so far, quitting. Will it go more than...
Not resigned.
No,
they're standing down
at the
next election. That's a very different matter, Christopher.
It's the first... Sorry, thank you for chiding me. The first planned election since 2015, so maybe expected.
Yes.
Or not, or perhaps an indictment of the party's polling ratings. I mean, will it be more than the 75 who went in 97, do you think?
I mean, I think those standing down this time, it is a function for many people of their time in office. We've already seen statistically your lifespan as an MP is significantly shorter than it used to be. And the reason for that is, of course, the pressures of the job and, of course, the hostility of social media, the death threats, people genuinely find it exhausting. I find it exhausting. I mean, even as a, sunlit uplands person as I am,
yes.
I wake up some days and think, oh, really?
You get daily threats, do you? I mean,
well, yes. I mean, not
daily.
Not sort of daily threats, but I've had death threats. I've had paper death threats with, we know where you live sort of thing. I've had people spitting at me outside Parliament. It's pretty revolting.
Yeah.
And then that idiot in the EU hat who just screams abuse. I'm not even going to say his name. Don't say it, Chris.
I won't.
But, he screams abuse all day long, naming me, just literally publicly. It's just disgusting, frankly, the way politicians are held in such contempt. So I'm not surprised people have had enough at all. And obviously some of them are just fed up because they can see that, their polling situation isn't good. So obviously some of that. But this is nothing like in 2010 with the expenses scandal where half of the Conservatives, more than half, I think, were new people. And that was my intake, 2010.
Yes.
And I think a lot of those people, we've been in politics for 14 years. A lot of us have had enough. And as for those who've been in even longer than that, many of them are just saying, nah, time to call it a day.
Yes. You're staying on?
I have been readopted. Yes, I'm staying on. But I do think the interesting thing is in 2010 when I became an MP, barely any emails were used. There was no Instagram, there was no X, there was no Facebook. And so that is the extraordinary change, is that the availability, the ability to just sit there and abuse people in public life now is so great. And I do think that has quite a bad impact on public servants' mental health, actually. So I do think it's something that ultimately, we need to address if we want to have good politicians.
Yes, your party is 20 points behind in the polls. You ran for leader twice. Do you ever look at the mirror and go, if only they'd chosen me?
No, I never have any regrets. I mean, at the time, in 2019, I was nowhere close. In 2016, that was the Brexit issue. And it was very clear to me then that had I gone through with it, but I withdrew in favour of Theresa May. So she became Prime Minister. And it seemed to me at the time that the only person who could command the support of members of Parliament was somebody who was, in fact, a Remainer. And I know that may sound weird now, but when I was in the final
now, that's the right choice.
It's very difficult. You can never know, can you? You can never know. But I still think if I had my time again with the information at the time, I would have made the same decision because, what colleagues were saying is they would resign the whip and they would know confidence straight away. And it seemed to me, having just achieved this amazing thing of agreeing to leave the EU, to then have what would have been the most appalling instability. We could face a recession. It could really unravel very quickly. So it seemed to me it wasn't the right thing for the country to put them through that. What we needed was, stability. And so that was the decision at the time.
Yes.
And as to what comes after, no one has a crystal ball.
No one knows. I mean, and Rishi Sunak, he should be leader until the election. There's talk about him being removed, maybe after local elections. I mean, is that going to happen? Is that mad?
I mean, Rishi is working flat out. He's had some amazing achievements. We've seen the government policy contributing to inflation falling from over 11% at the peak to now 3.4%, forecast to come down. UK economy forecast to grow at one of the best rates in G7 over the next few years. We've seen a miracle of employment. More people employed, less unemployed, and waiting lists are coming down in spite of industrial action. We're seeing waiting lists coming down in the NHS. So important.
The polls aren't responding to what you're saying.
No, but nevertheless, I think the Prime Minister is determined to carry on with the plan. And if you contrast that with Labour, who are just sort of, I literally can't make out what their plans are anywhere. They're unfunded. They've got no idea what it is that they would do.
Well, we'll hear from Jenny Chapman very shortly. But finally, your party can win the election. I think John Curtis gives your party 1% chance this week.
1% chance is today's number. But what we are seeing is the economy is improving. Real wages are rising. People will start to feel better off. It's been a very, very tough time. With two black swan events, as they call it, in COVID and then the first war in Europe with an energy price crisis. So we need to give the Prime Minister time to let those green shoots of recovery come through, and then we'll see how people are feeling.
Normal Law, we're proud of you for quoting about green shoots. Listen, dear Andrea Leadsom, thank you for joining us on a busy morning in Westminster this week. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, next up, Jenny Chapman, Baroness Chapman of Darlington. Jenny Chapman, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast.
Morning.
Morning. You're a peer, of course, but you were an MP from 2010 to 2019. Did you ever imagine, when you stopped being an MP, that you'd be so far ahead in the polls after 4 years of this government?
In a word, no. This has been one hell of a turnaround project. When I lost my seat that night in December 2019, along with a lot of Labour colleagues.
In a landslide, Tory landslide.
Complete landslide. A tidal wave came and you thought, right, this party that I love and I've been part of most of my adult life needs some serious surgery. It was obvious what had happened. The good people of the United Kingdom had rejected what the Labour Party was offering at that point. We needed to change and change fast. I knew that day that Keir Starmer was the right person to do that. And to his credit, he has done what pretty much everybody was telling him was at least a 2-term project. He's done it in 4 years.
It's incredible. I mean, it's an implosion by the Tory party. It'll be written about by historians, I think, for years. How do you lose an 80-seat majority? And we're apparently about to lose. Of course, we're not there yet, 6 months away.
No, long way to go.
As the polls suggest. Yeah. Do you miss being an MP?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I miss the accountability that you get. I miss doing my surgery. I miss that very close contact that I had with my constituents. I do miss that. But I think, you move on in life, and we've got a great new candidate in Darlington in Lola McAvoy. She'll be a really good MP. So I think you've got to just keep on moving forward. The party, I'm very proud of what we've achieved since I stopped being an MP and the part that I've played in that. I'm very pleased with what we've managed to do so far. But obviously you achieve nothing in opposition.
No.
So what you want to do is win an election.
Yes.
and get to make the difference that back in my 20s, when I came into politics as a local councillor in Darlington, I wanted to do things to change things for the better. And in opposition, you do bugger all, don't you? So
it doesn't help anybody in terms of your supporters. But Labour often exists, doesn't it? I often think Labour is happier in opposition than the Tories are, in a sense that Labour appears, as long as it's campaigning for something, it's doing its job, but it's forgetting who it's serving.
I think that's right, and I think that's what happened. Sadly, under Jeremy Corbyn, is we became more of a protest movement, and that's not good enough for working class people in this country who need proper representation and need a government that's going to invest in them and look at our health service, our education, and our schools, look at crime, all these things. People are saying, as a country, we're going backwards. We need a government that's going to stop that and turn things around. The Labour Party is the only real party that can do that for those communities. So if the Labour Party doesn't win, it's sad for people who want to get elected, but mostly, it's a dereliction of duty.
Yeah.
Labour Party's got to win.
Do you worry the party's being backed in a corner, being too much like the Tories? I mean, in a sense that you've got the £28 billion spend on green measures. Certainly the jobs policy is certainly different to the Tory party, but there's so much you're tying yourself to what the Tories have been doing. And that's obviously not to shock the electorate. We're over Middle England. That's the reason why you're doing it. But is that a risk that you'll be quite limited in ambition in government?
I think what's limiting is what the Tories have done to the economy, which without a doubt means that there is less money to invest in the things that we want to invest in. That's just a fact. There are some very big differences between us and the Conservative Party. You look at Rachel Reeves and the way she would run the economy. The reason people have much more confidence in the Labour Party now on the economy compared to the Conservatives is because of the credibility that she has as a former economist at the Bank of England. You look at the things we want to do on taxation and private schools, and to spend that money on supporting state primary schools, and especially looking at some of the catch-up issues we've had after COVID, that needs to be put right, because that's a ticking time bomb that this country would be paying for a very long time if we don't get that right. So there are some quite big differences between us. But the biggest difference that I can see is the Tory party has got to a point now where it is ungovernable, where there is no coherence, there's no strategy, they don't have a plan for the country, versus a Labour Party where people are getting on with each other, where there's a respectful relationship within the shadow cabinet, where it's stable, it's steady, there's clarity of what it wants to do. You've got a leader that people can imagine as Prime Minister of this country on the world
stage.
Blink
test, you call it.
Absolutely. And that's the real difference that people are seeing. And that's what is happening. You're seeing that in the polls. I think that people are just done with the Tories, and they're done with each other. And that's why now we're seeing all this stuff about let's have yet another Prime Minister. 5 Prime Ministers in 9 years. It's not serious. It's not serious.
Well, I think things happened in the interim, and let's not even go past the Tory politics. But yeah, it looks chaotic to the outside person. The flip-flopping, though, that Keir Starmer's criticised for, which you can do in opposition, is that a strength, do you think?
I see it as starting out with a prospectus when you are a brand new, straight into a leader of the opposition, and then you've seen Keir evolve from that, taking over the burning skip of a party of Jeremy Corbyn to now being a credible candidate for Prime Minister.
He jumped his ideas. He got the power, didn't he? When you were supporting him as the leadership candidate, the tuition fees, abolishing universal credit, defending EU freedom movement, and he's dropped those.
Because he wants to be Prime Minister. This is a guy that's serious about his politics. He's not there, as we've just discussed, to lead a protest movement. His job is to say to the British public, trust in me, I will look after your future, your pensions, your mortgages, your kids' futures. These are serious, big things that we want to be trusted with. You cannot have someone who just goes around saying things, that maybe they've believed when they were a student, or maybe, things that are popular within the Labour Party. You've got to have a credible offer for the whole country, and that's a journey that Keir. I'd say there has been a journey. I'm completely upfront about that. Yeah. But I'm really pleased to have seen
it's working in the polls. Yes. I mean, I've been struck by how on security he's been in lockstep with the government, and I think that was really important because the nadir for many people during Jeremy Corbyn's time as leader was over Salisbury when he questioned whether it was Russia behind the poisoning. Yes. And anyone involved in Whitehall and security in this country would say that was a moment at which everyone took a breath and thought, can this guy be Prime Minister? And it seems that even on, and it's been hard on Israel and Gaza, he has stayed with the government and hasn't really gone ahead of where they are on the big foreign policy matters.
Yes.
I think that's been noticed by a lot of people.
And I think that's been important because you need to show that you can be responsible and you are not going to play politics with something like Ukraine. You are not going to play games with this. There is a national interest which is higher and above and much more important than your party political interest. And that is one of the reasons that Keir Starmer has gained the respect of the British public for that. And I think it's what he believes as well. His background as a chief prosecutor, he understands how criminal gangs work, what terrorism is really all about and how you prevent it. And I think that international perspective that he has on those issues that are about keeping people safe means that, he isn't someone who thinks, right, what's in it for me? Where's the red line between me and the Tories on this issue? Yeah. it's what is the right thing to do.
You know really well. You used to work with him very closely in his office. Then he became a minister, shadow minister. Does he lack some flair, a bit of get up and go? Is he a bit too steady for voters?
He is steady.
Is that what we need? Maybe.
I think we definitely need steady. But he is steady.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a grafter.
He's quite a laugh bride, probably, isn't he?
Yeah, he's funny. But do we want a clown as Prime Minister? Been there, done that recently, haven't we?
Mm.
We want someone who is steady, who is serious, who works long hours diligently for the benefit of the people of this country. And that's what he offers. If that's not good enough for some people, don't vote for him, vote for somebody else. There will be clowns on offer, I have no doubt. But
across all the politics.
I think the majority of people in this country think that they want someone who's serious and who's credible and who can steer the country through what is going to be still quite a choppy period.
Has work started on the election manifesto? Is it ready? Is it ready? Work started, of course, with all the Democratic process of the Labour Party, but is it ready now?
It's getting ready.
Is
It's never ready till the whistle blows, is it? Because you're constantly refining and improving and discussing. And
dropping policies.
And things change.
Sometimes,
the context changes and there are new challenges emerging all the time. So you don't fix it in stone and say, there's, put that in a drawer, it's done.
Mm.
It's something that we care very much about and we want to get right.
And pledge cards, maybe?
Oh, I'd love a pledge card.
Bring it back.
We all love a pledge card.
We bring back 97. I can remember them, I think. Tough
yeah,
on Crime.
Me too.
I don't know why I can remember that from obviously Political Geek, but that was 30 years ago nearly.
Yeah, I mean, pledge cards, obviously we love them because we remember them, but I think a lot of it now is about digital and making sure our sort of social media offer is right as well. So there's a lot of work going on. We were expecting an election May the 2nd. Clearly, Rishi Sunak's bottled that, and we're going to have to wait a bit longer. Whether it's the autumn, whether it's January 2025, we'll be ready for when it comes.
Would he go as long as that, you think?
I don't know. I mean, who knows? I thought it would be May. Now most people seem to be saying the autumn, but this is a guy he's just paralysed by fear, I think.
Well, he's miles behind the polls. I mean, he hasn't budged them really properly since, or a bit since replacing the Truss, but not much.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I don't know when the election's going to be. I think it should be sooner rather than later. I think the country's crying out for it.
And should companies be concerned about your jobs plans? They're worried about the new powers for workers and all. There's concern already bubbling up from the CBI and the like.
Not at all. We've put a lot of effort and we've been credited for putting a lot of effort into rebuilding a partnership with business. We know what the Tories said to business, famously. And we've taken a very, very different approach. We want a partnership with business. We do want to rebalance things as far as workers are concerned, and I think a lot of employers will agree with this, that the balance has tipped too far to disadvantage workers, and that's not in the interest
some
of the
like
country.
0 hours contracts, don't they? It works for some
people
families.
do, absolutely, and we need to understand that, and we need to work out a framework that means that it works for everybody.
So
At
not
the moment,
completely,
it doesn't.
you can volunteer if you want to.
The detail of that will be coming out.
Yes.
But, this is about making sure it works for everybody, and that's in the interest of business too. So we're having some great conversations with business at the moment. We will get this right. We're not going to rush it out. We're not going to do this as a headline grabber. It's going to be serious, well thought through policy.
Yes. And just finally on Brexit, sorry to mention that word, you were the shadow Brexit minister. I was the last person to interview Jeremy Corbyn and the first to interview Keir Starmer by luck for my podcast back in the day. And he then said to me, Keir Starmer, we did it remotely because of COVID back in April 2020. He said, I'm going to learn why people voted Brexit. And I thought it was a fascinating thing, a learning he's going to go through, because of course he's obviously got really into the battle and back to second referendum. Does he get Brexit now? I mean, he won't try and reverse the key point of sovereignty, which is us running our own stuff from now on. That won't be changed, will it?
No, but I don't think anybody wants to reverse Brexit, certainly not.
Lib Dems do, I think, maybe.
Well, that's up to them. I mean, the Labour Party certainly doesn't. You couldn't do it without a referendum, and I think you'd need your head read if you thought a referendum was what this country needed. We've got to make it work as it is. When Keir said that, though, I think even on day one of his leadership, when he said that, that was about respect for the people of this country. And that comment was him saying, I want to listen, I want to understand. We'd gone down to our fourth election defeat in a row. You don't just laugh that off and say, why did the electorate get it wrong? You say, what did we do wrong? Why were we so wide of the mark that so many of you couldn't vote for us?
Yeah.
And you can see he's done that work. He's understood, he's heard what people have said to him, and he's changed the party as a consequence.
We're out of time now. For a quick one, no one's listening. What are the odds on you winning the election?
I'm not doing that. No way.
I'd ask that. But you can't take it for granted.
Not at all. No.
Well, listen, Baroness Chapman of Darlington, Jenny Chapman, thank you for joining us this week on Chopper's Political Podcast. And that's all for this week, listeners. I've loved being back here in my favourite pub table here in Westminster. Please sign up and subscribe to the podcast to ensure that you can hear every episode every single week. Thank you to my guests this week, Dame Andrea Leadsom and Jenny Chapman, Baroness Chapman of Darlington. I'd love to know your thoughts about what Andrea and Jenny had to say. Please tweet me if you like. I'm at Christopher Hope on X, and email me chopper@gbnews.uk. If you enjoyed it, please tell your mates. If you really enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and elsewhere to help other people find it. Thanks to the brilliant team behind the camera at GB News and the microphone making this podcast. Mick Booker, Jeff Marsh, Rebecca Nunes, George McMillan, Alistair Tantier, Joe Scowen, Emil Kunda, and our special guest today, Cara Heaney. Most of all, thank you to you for listening. If you want more Chopper in your life, and frankly, who doesn't, catch me during the week on GB News and at midday on Wednesdays for PMQs Live. And do keep up to the best reporting on our website, gbnews.com. Until next time, cheerio!